I read a book a while back, and I don't remember which one it was, unfortunately, but it described the erasure of the Byzantine Empire from the Western imagination.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I was a relatively old person before I really had any sense at all of the extent of the Byzantine Empire or the catastrophe of its demolition. And the author of this particular book believed that the defeat of the Byzantine Empire by the Islamic world, and maybe by the psychopaths of the Islamic world, was so traumatic to the West that we just erased it from our historical memory. And then it seems to me, Douglas, that something like that is going on right now.
Yes.
I mean, you look, let's talk about the universities for a moment. Now, there's a fair bit of pathology in the universities, a fair bit. It's like top to bottom. They're absolutely incorrigible as far as I'm concerned, especially the Ivy Leagues. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should be deprived of all funding as far as I'm concerned. In any case, the protests that emerged there and all across the world, you detail out, and with some great sadness and amazement. But I think part of it is that it's not within the purview of the people who are protesting to replace their theory that the victims are uprising with the notion that a malevolent cult of death that worships sadistic suffering and annihilation exists. It's too far outside their worldview. Now, there's more to it than that, because Iran is, you saw that the Ayatollah, this is the most amazing thing. The Ayatollah himself congratulated the American universities, or the universities of the UK for that matter too.
He congratulated the Western students for joining the anti-colonial struggle. Not mentioning to the students that, of course, Ayatollah Khomeini, had ordered the gunning down of their contemporaries across the streets of Tehran in 2009, and on many other occasions.
A minor issue,
But when Iranian students come out on the streets to protest against the actual oppression of the Islamic Revolutionary government in Tehran, Ayatollah Khomeini, who congratulates the Western students for uprising, shoots the students who uprise in Iran. But that's a detail.
Yes, it's an ignorable detail, clearly. Then there's another issue that seems to be operating at the universities. A disproportionate number of the protesters, or the protester puppets, you might say, are young women, right? And so there's something to that too, because it's in the nature of young women, I would say, to adopt the mien of sympathy towards victimization and fail to see the predators lurking underneath underneath the rocks, let's say. Women haven't traditionally fought wars. They're not necessarily equipped to identify actual enemies. Their proclivity is sympathy, and that's exacerbated in the case of naivety. And there's a great intermixture of pride in that too, in that female sympathy can, what would you say, overcome the pathology of victimization. That's Eve, as far as I'm concerned, clutching the serpent to her breast. And the universities have become feminized to a great degree. And then there's this incredibly deep, people overall, I think, in the West have no idea how pathological the universities have become. The social sciences, the humanities run on an oppressor-victim narrative, and everything is seen through that light. And you can learn the tenets of the oppressor-victimizer narrative in 5 minutes, and then you can explain the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and by the way, there's a very healthy dose of narcissism thrown into the whole thing, which is that to the extent that any students at American universities get taught anything about the Middle East, they will be taught Edward Said's claim of Orientalism, which, of course, is a claim that is, by Said's own admission, spilled way beyond even the claims that he made in his book. Said's insight, if you can call it that, was that when Westerners approached the Arab and Muslim world, they did so through the eyes of Westerners, which is an observation so banal that only the academy could extrapolate out a whole course from it. I mean, what eyes were...
Especially without giving some due credit to the fact of Western eyes.
Well, people when Napoleon goes to Egypt, one of the things he does is to order a massive catalogue of all of the riches and treasures of ancient Egypt, a catalogue which Egypt itself had not produced to that point.
Right.
And one of the people who Napoleon gets on to do this, and who founds the Cairo Museum, by the way, ends up also being one of the people who breaks the code of the Rosetta Stone, giving the lost languages back to the region. But anyway, people don't need to know any of that.
Another detail.
That's all just,
it's another detail.
Why do you need to know that when you can say, this is what Said really
Western
gifted.
eyes who defined ancient artifacts as treasures to begin with.
Right.
Right. Then it becomes self-evident. Right.
But just consider the enormously advantageous aspect of narcissism to this mix, because the narcissistic thing that Said helped to give American and other Western students was nothing in the world happens unless you in the West make it happen. You make it so. The Palestinians, like all the Arabs, the Muslim world, the developing world as a whole, does nothing of its own volition. It can't even make mistakes on its own dime. It's you that made them do it. What did we in America do to cause this? Is the lens, the only lens through which an American student will be taught to look at the world. Why is this happening in China? What did we do to China will be the way, but everything is interpreted. So this is just not fit for purpose for understanding the world, but it's hugely narcissistic because, among other things, I mean, and you can see this in the spilling out of protests across American and other Western campuses. One of the things I say at one point in the book is, what level of delusion and narcissistic delusion do you have to be in to think that you at the University of Columbia or Berkeley or Yale or Princeton or Oxford can dictate war policy 2 continents away?